We're on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So if you want to join us and watch the antics of Amelia and certainly of Randall Kenneth Jones, make sure that you look us up, any one of us, and you can find the video streaming right now. So look us up.
I have decided I'm going to start being more visually shocking moving forward. If I do stuff on camera that you can't see, then that'll get more people to come over and follow us. For example, you know what I want to talk about today, Amelia?
What?
Me.
Is it all about you?
It's all about me. So if you did not watch the video feed, you didn't get to see the visual aid that I just showed.
No, listen, this is a topic, we at a couple months back, we dove into narcissism and what it actually is and how it shows up and how it bites a lot of us and takes us up short. And so it was a topic that people asked us to come back and really dive in, because I think narcissism is something that's very, very confusing, of the difference between somebody who actually has a mental disorder of narcissism versus somebody who has narcissistic tendencies. Very different, still very abusive, and gets confused as the sociopath, right? And so I figured today would be a great idea to dive into the different behaviors and what is linked to what, and how to be able to help you when you're in your narcissistic tendencies, or how to defend yourself when you are up against a narcissist.
I don't know anyone who hasn't said that to me, Amelia. I don't know a single person who at some point in time has not said he or she is such a narcissist. And it's not something any of us like when we come upon it.
And it's a term that's used often, but not necessarily correctly.
Correctly, right.
Right. So just from the, we got look at how many wonderful people we have on stage. How many people here have actually interacted or had to work in some deal with a narcissist? Me. All right, I'm trying to see for flashes mark. Yeah, see, there's definitely people on stage who had these experiences.
Oh my God, Tara's flashing her mic like crazy. This does not bode well for
Tara,
us.
yeah, for sure.
This does not bode well for us at all.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, listen. Unfortunately, they're everywhere. I think we've all dealt with them, and if you haven't dealt with one yet, congratulations, but they're coming.
Right. Well, one of the crafts, the gifts that a narcissist has, is that you actually start to think it's you.
Well,
right.
That's their goal.
Right. Part of their power is it doesn't matter what the situation is, and it really doesn't matter what you think you saw and heard. They have mastered gaslighting, that you actually start to question yourself, and there starts the beginning flow of the danger, because narcissists find people with these huge hearts and huge abilities to give, and they are food for the narcissist, and they feed off of you to a point that you actually think the damage and the problem is you. And that's where the psychological, that's what we try to do with behaviorism, is help people prevent that, to be able to put the bubble around them so they do not get eaten alive by people who come into their houses, their lives as narcissists, and to be able to understand the difference between a narcissistic tendency and an actual narcissist. So just to put some foundational work there, somebody who actually suffers from the mental disorder of narcissism actually has like a portion of their brain, right? Think about like a birth defect, that is not formed correctly. So they don't have the ability to have empathy. They don't have it. So it doesn't matter how good of a person you are. It doesn't matter how many behavioral skills that you have. You can't teach somebody something that doesn't live within them. They actually do not have the ability to empathize with anything that you're saying or what you're requesting. And so you have to understand that when you make decisions for yourself, if this is somebody who is going to be healthy for you in your trajectory and how you want to show up in the world, because they can't change, because they don't have that piece in their brain that is wired towards empathy. Now, somebody who has narcissistic tendencies, which we meet more of those people absolutely can adapt a new behavior, new thinking, and new habit to move away from their narcissistic tendency. So first and foremost, it's the understanding of what are you really dealing with, and then making the decisions that are best for yours. If it's a behavioral problem, right, in a thought process, right? They're just so self-absorbed in themselves, right? And they are very me, myself, and I. And a narcissistic tendency is somebody who brings the conversation back to themselves. So as you're talking, it doesn't matter what they're talking about. You could be talking about, I just broke my arm, and they're going to go, well, you broke your arm. Well, I broke my leg and my arm and my whatever, right? That's a narcissistic tendency.
Are they aware? Can I ask? Okay, so narcissist versus narcissist already helped me a lot. Are they aware, if they have no empathy, a true narcissist, are they aware that they're manipulating you? Or is that
because awareness is attached to empathy. Right. The only way I can come into awareness that maybe I am participating in the problem if I can empathize on your position. But if I don't have empathy, I lack awareness. Right? So that's why when you're trying to talk to a narcissist, they look at you like you got two heads. They'll actually describe themselves as people who care for other people. And you'd be like, where? There's no evidence. Like, by what point? Right? I mean, they actually believe with conviction what they're saying because they don't understand that they are not wired to actually empathize and put themselves in somebody else's shoes. They have no awareness of the impact that they're making on other people. They literally think it's everybody else and not them.
And I feel sometimes so manipulated, and to realize that these people are manipulating me, and they don't even know they're doing it. It's 100% who they are.
Well, that's the thing. They propagate. If they propagate and share that lie so many times, they actually start to believe it, and then they feel themselves the victim, even though they create the storm and then complain about getting wet and blaming everybody else, right? And by the way, just before it gets too far out, we did have a question from Facebook from my friend Dana Lisa again. Good morning, Dana. And she asked, what if it's a parent or sibling?
That's wonderful.
She's already said that this is her ex-boyfriend, so we're going to throw Dana's ex-boyfriend under the bus
right
now. Well, so what we know, here's what we know. Let's always start with what do we know? We know that we cannot control anything outside of us, right? So we have no power in changing anybody, whether they're a narcissist or our best friend next door. We have no power outside of self. So that's first and foremost. And one of the things that I try to help people when I am doing behavior modifications, right? Because that's what we're talking about. How do I modify my thoughts, my actions, my beliefs, my behavior in response to what's going on outside of me, right? And so number one is unhooking for yourself. Now I'm talking about you. I'm not talking about anybody else. It's you with you. Why would you care about something or someone who doesn't care about you? See, when we're hurt, right? When we get hurt, when we get our feelings hurt, when we are shocked on how somebody did something, how they treat us, right? That whole pain, that pain that we feel going, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're treating me this way. That's because we care about how they feel. And we have to adopt the modification is, why would you care about someone who has not demonstrated care for you? So any thought about why would they, how could they, all that is noise causing you more damage. Because once somebody demonstrates that they don't actually care for you, you have to change your relationship with them. Your responsibility is to change the influence, the noise, and the value. Because if they're not demonstrating care for your basic needs, then you need to detach from the value of that relationship. Because if they bring no value. So you can't care about something that you don't value. So you have to stop valuing which does not exist. And the reason we do this, the behavioral reason we do this, is because we want to believe the story. Not real. We want to believe what could be. We want to believe the potential. We want to believe what we hope it would be. instead of taking what is. And that you have 100% control of. You have control on the emotions you attach to something, and you have control of the story that is versus the story you hope it to be. Let that land for just a second.
Oh, so good.
Right? And that's the difficulty. When you lead your life with a big heart, you're caring. And your assumption is that other people care too. And you need to put in the behavioral practice to have people demonstrate they care about you. And if they don't demonstrate the effort of caring, then you must remove the care.
How do we know? And I'll say to you, my husband, fairly regularly over our 26 years together, has looked at me quizzically and quizzically, you can see him now doing that.
Yes, I did.
Why do you care? This person has not proven they care about you. Look at A, B, C, D, and E. Because you know him. He's very funny.
It.
I'll get it. But he's very, pragmatic. And do I believe what you just said? That I want to believe the story? Yeah, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. But I have trouble not wanting to. How do we recognize it? I don't even recognize it. Now I'm gonna recognize it better. Now.
Right. Well, and that's my
point.
point.
How do we
As
recognize?
a behaviorist, I'm trying to point out and mirror people's behavior so they can actually do something about it.
Right.
And where that stems from, when you ask the question, well, why do I care? That's because your value of self is outside of self. You're looking for outside validation that you matter. And you're looking for people because you're food, right? If you're looking for outside validation, narcissists have a radar for you. And they show up in your life because you're energetically attracting them. When you're looking for validation outside of yourself, it's like a honing device for a narcissist who comes and feeds off of you. They feed off your talent. They feed off your energy. They feed off your care. They literally feed off your heart because they know you want their validation that you're worthy. And they create this dysfunctional spiral that they get you so contorted, you can't even figure out why you exist.
And you have
because
and
they've eaten your heart.
And then it's like Stockholm syndrome, right? And then you stay because you're so used to that, right? And that is what your acceptable term of love and connection is. And then you wind up staying with that quote unquote abuser because that's ultimately what it is. A narcissist is somebody that is just taking advantage of you 90% of the time, if not more. And again, it's like you said, if you're that pleaser, that person that always wants to have validation, you're an easy target.
Right. And so part of the reason
on the stream, I have been providing a litany of facial expressions reacting to it. Just want to let you know they're not all. Some of them have been quite painful.
But I think part of the reason why us as the senior team put together Designing Genius is it allows somebody to build from within what has meaning to them from their own sources within, so they stop becoming food for others. Because in a healthy adult relationship, right, this is where we should aspire to, everybody, a healthy adult relationship, I would be 100% filled and fueled by Amilya for Amilya, and then I would share my heart and my passion and my genius with somebody else and move away from me trying to feed off of somebody else for something that I perceive they have that I don't. When you are taking from another and not building that same thing within, you are living in narcissistic tendencies. It should be 100-100. The whole thing of 50-50 is narcissistic. So if I say I want you to be if I say to you, you're my everything, you complete me, you're my 50-50, I am saying that you are now responsible for 50% of me. Not only are you responsible for yourself, You're also responsible for 50% of me. You hear how narcissistic that sounds? Why would I be responsible for you? I have a tough time being responsible for me. Versus two individuals to say, I'm responsible for my happiness, I'm responsible for my joy, I'm happy for my skills, I'm happiness for my presence in this world, and I'm 100% responsible, and I want to be able to have relationships with other people who are 100% responsible for their side. And we share in chosen experiences.
So how does the whole self-love, self-care, love yourself, be good to yourself, put yourself first, how does that, which is a lot of rhetoric that we hear a lot, and
Yep.
we've been here for quite some time, how does that not feed narcissistic tendencies?
Well,
Because
I was going to say, if I can jump, one of the things I often say on this topic is, and this will answer something because Dana also mentioned, also again from Facebook, said when we stop letting them feed, they get very angry and kick you out of their life, and that we should be thankful for, right? Absolutely. You know, the thing that I say
but
to
it
answer,
hurts. It
yeah,
doesn't matter. It's hurt.
oh,
It's probably when you have a narcissist in your life, they convince you that their love is the thing.
right, and nobody else loves you because that's what they do.
Out, it literally feels like you being turned inside out. It literally feels like your insides are coming out because they're so good in their craft that it leaves you crippled.
Yeah, ultimately, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, because ultimately what they do is they also segregate you, pull you away from your friends,
Yep.
kill your social circle. That way, you're their only go-to person, and they feel completely isolated and alone, and they might as well stay with you because they've lost everyone else. So, but to your point, Randy, that what we were talking, what you just asked about, is that self-care. You know, self-care isn't selfish. It's absolutely pivotal, because if you don't care for yourself, then you're not there to take care of others. And here's where the narcissists come in, because people say, well, you can't pour from an empty bucket. The unfortunate reality is that you can, but what comes out is your physical, mental, and emotional health. And that's what gets poured out. And even when that's done, the person you're pouring into still wants more. There's nothing left. And when there's nothing left, that's when they walk away from you, and you're still the bad guy, because it doesn't matter how many times you said yes, how many times you helped them and you bled for them. It's that one time that you couldn't because you were bleeding. They didn't even think about you, or that the fact that you were bleeding or that you were spent. They're just pissed that you weren't there to give yet more of your blood, more of your time, more of your energy. And again, that's why it's so toxic. And then they make you feel like you're the problem, it's your fault, and you're the evil one. And that's where the danger really comes in, because then it puts the person who is the victim of the narcissist into a possible depression, a downward spiral that's hard to stop.
Right, and that's why the self-care is so important, Randy, right? Because as you feed yourself and you become your own self fuel source, you are less damaged from people outside of you because you're building from within. And the way you build within also gives evidence to other people that you are 100%, right? You want to be able to see people who have behaviors and practices that are healthy. What I'll tell you is when you look at a narcissist, their habits and behaviors are so self driven, right? They're obsessive about I, totally obsessive about I, and don't have the ability to even understand any type of conversation of we. They don't understand it. It's that they don't even process it because they're eye centric. And so it's hard to distinguish somebody who is 100% full, meaning they're taking care of their 100% and their self-care and their needs, and somebody who has taken that to an extreme, right? And so you have to be able to look at the tiny behaviors that become the tell.
And so, Amilya, there is a question in the back chat that just wanted to clarify that narcissist doesn't know that they're doing what they're doing. And I think the reason for that is, you know, we don't hate all narcissists, and we can love them as well. We just need to know where we are at in that relationship.
Well, you can also love them from a distance.
Actually has it is actually a clinical mental disorder. Somebody who actually suffers from narcissism, And that portion of the brain that is wired for empathy is damaged. And so if you are in a relationship, which means you choose to be in that relationship, you need to understand that that person that you're interacting with doesn't have the ability to empathize with what you're seeing, what you're feeling, and what you're doing. So the hard boundaries and guidelines are what you must rely on in order for you to have the room and the space in the relationship to take care of yourself. Because they're not going to give it to you. They're actually going to push against those boundaries because they do not understand why you're asking for self, because they are what matters. So in their equation, they can't see you because it's about them.
If I can jump in on that, and I'll just add that while there are some that are clinically diagnosed or should be clinically diagnosed, there's also a lot of people that live that narcissist behavior just because they're selfish and they're greedy, whatever it is, and they don't have that mental block.
Or they learned it. They
Right.
can be the child of
Right.
a narcissistic parent, and they learn the behavior. Remember, we are not our behaviors and our beliefs. We can change our behavior and our beliefs at will. It's up to us.
Yeah, but it's also,
Different.
but I jumped in just to make sure that people understand that it's not necessarily, the mental block. Sometimes it's just people are just like that because they're selfish, they're greedy, they're at that point that significance is all that matters to them and certainty is all that matters to them. They really don't give a darn about anybody else. And so just be aware of that just because somebody's a narcissist, you also don't want to feel, you don't want people saying, oh, they're a narcissist, they're missing a part of their brain, poor them. Well, hold on, because narcissists could really hurt a lot of people. So I don't want it to be like, well, it's a mental disorder, let's just feel bad for them, because that's dangerous there as well.
That goes back to what I'm saying is the rule. Do not care for something outside of self if it has not demonstrated care back. You should not care if they don't care. Why would you care about somebody who has demonstrated they don't care about you?
You mean I can't fix them, Amilya? I can't
No,
fix
you
them?
cannot fix that.
You cannot
fix that. And you can't empathize either, because all it's going to do is hurt you.
Yeah, you get sucked into the meat grinder.
Yeah. And so that's a practice. Many of us with big hearts, we care first. We care before anything's even been demonstrated. We show up with care because we have a belief of kindness. Kindness and care are different. Kindness is an act. If you drop your pencil and I pick it up, that's an act of kindness. We all should be kind. You are responsible to be kind. That's not caring. Caring is an exchange of self. For me to care about you, right? You can only, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, and you can only really be in one thing at one time. So if I'm in a moment of caring for you, there's something that isn't being cared for, which is usually self. But part of a relationship is caring for each other. I'm going to care for you, and you are going to care for me. But if you are the only one doing the caring, you need to take a step back. Why would you care about somebody that does not care about you? They are not worth your time, energy, focus at all if they cannot demonstrate care.
There's a question here in the chat as well from Mario. He says, can you be giving at times and be narcissistic at others? Which is exactly what Amilya was talking about. You can have narcissistic tendencies, and a lot of times that comes because it's learned behavior. Maybe you had a narcissistic father. I know a guy. Maybe you had, there's other narcissists in your life, and that kind of becomes it's a learned behavior because a narcissist gets their way so often. So there's that.
They bully their way.
Right.
So one of the talents of a narcissist is they're relentless. They're relentless until they get your way. And so what happens is they wear you down. They're bullies. They will bully you, and to the point you're like, oh, I can't take it anymore. You just want to make it stop. And the way you make it stop is you give in. and they literally eat you alive from the inside. And so this is how, understanding where you have narcissistic tendencies and what are the boundaries and guidelines around them so that you can show up healthy. I am not saying all narcissistic tendencies are bad. I'm not saying they're good or bad. What I'm saying is you have to be aware of yourself and be responsible for the impact it has on others. And the only way you understand the impact it has on others is if you have highly effective communication skills and you build into the relationship so that somebody has the space to express to you how they feel in response to your presence. And that's what a real, I call it a genius circle, you can call it whatever you want. Having somebody in your life to be able to say, hey, that just hurt my feelings. What did you mean by that? Because this is what I heard. And for me to go, oh my goodness, hold on, back over. I did not mean that. I take full responsibility. I'm hungry and I'm tired, and I lost my way for a moment. Let me start again. That's the people who care about you hold you responsible for who you say you want to become. And that's a whole other level of a relationship. Most people are involved with juvenile relationships. They haven't matured to the next level. And so when you have that maturity of that type of relationship around you, you almost have no choice but to become more. You elevate. That's why they say you become the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. And what I'm asking you to do is to evaluate the level of those relationships. And is there something that you can do differently to elevate those relationships? And the first thing that I'm asking you to take inventory of is, are the people in your life actually demonstrating care in the areas that matter to you? Not caring about you the way they want to care about you. Are they caring about you in the ways that have meaning to you? That is the first gap I see immediately when I work with partners and couples. They actually are not demonstrating care in the language that has meaning to the individual.
So what
That
I'm
is so
getting
good.
at, that you and I are becoming each other.
No, but that is
Yes. Exactly what that means, Randy. I am becoming you, and you are becoming me, and together
and
we
this is a
become.
surprise to absolutely no one. So I'm ready to throw myself under the bus. Are you ready?
hold on before you
Let's
throw
go.
yourself under the bus. It's 11:30, so let's do this room
Quick
reset here really quickly. So welcome everyone. If you're just joining us, this is another Genius Hour here with Amilya Antonetti, of course Randall Kenneth Jones, and myself, Tony Rodriguez. Of course, if you're watching us or listening to us on Clubhouse, we encourage you to share this room to your Clubhouse hallway and to ping the people in that you know could and should be here. And Randy's holding a sign up that says me, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the narcissist, and we encourage you, of course, to also tune in and watch us, because we are live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and you can find us at Amilya. You can just look up Amilya.com, or you can look up Amilya Antonetti on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. Same thing with Randall Kenneth Jones. Look for him on those spaces, including Twitter. And of course, with me, you can just put in my name, Tony Rodriguez, or a hashtag Get Up and Grow, and you can find those there as well. So make sure that you're sharing this video, sharing this, because it's so important, because we all deal with narcissists. And we all, at some point, have had some narcissistic tendencies. It's important to be able to recognize them. It's important to be able to stop them when you do. And it's important to realize that when you are dealing with the narcissist, recognize them so you can put distance between you and them. And that, by the way, doesn't mean that you don't care. That doesn't mean you don't love them, but it means care for them and perhaps love them from afar, right?
Yeah.
Don't let them be in your inner circle.
So B in the back chat, I hope hopefully B's still here. She's asking, is it rare? Yes. To have a clinically diagnosed narcissist is very rare. But part of the reason why it's very rare is a narcissist is not going to go seek help because they think it's everybody else and not them. Right? So that's part of the problem is they don't seek counseling. right? So if you're somebody who's looking to seek counseling to be better, the chances are you're not a narcissist, right? Because you just have that awareness. So there's two things that are happening with the actual clinical diagnosis. The reason why the numbers are so low is those are the people who think they have no problems. Those are the ones that they will refuse help. They refuse therapy. They refuse help personal development because they're like, I'm awesome. I'm awesome. It's not me, it's everybody else. And so that's it. So V, yes, that's a great point. So thank you for sharing that in the back chat.
And Queen B also made a comment earlier in the video stream. She said it's nice to put a face with the voice. I wanted to say thank you because I'm positive it's my face that she was talking.
I'm sure it is.
It was certainly not my face. But I wanted to thank her for that. Okay, so here's my buck, and I think I always tell myself under a buck because I believe I'm not alone. You and I've discussed this before. I'm very uncomfortable with my ego, very uncomfortable with it because part of it part of me does not believe I deserve what I know I deserve. I'm not alone, and part of me has narcissistic tendencies. And I know that. I hate them. I'm uncomfortable with them. But where it comes from, and I'm really not trying to be awful, but I've spent my life as an actor. So it shouldn't surprise anybody that being around people with narcissistic tendencies is a little bit normal in my life because that is so much of that world. As a result of being around people like that, though I think I approach life with a very open heart, I've developed tendencies in those situations that I don't like. So I guess my caution for people is to not allow others to influence you to become like me. I mean, because I don't like it. I don't like that feeling. But in order to compete, in order to deal with people there, I feel like there's sometimes I'm downright arrogant in these situations, and I don't mean to be, but it's just a response to learned behavior of what people are giving me a lot. And there's lovely people who are actors and actresses and performing artists and stuff. There's lovely, wonderful people. But it's a challenging group of people to be around.
Yeah, and I think that for everybody, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, right? It doesn't matter where you started in this. As we age and mature, the way we showed up in our 20s doesn't necessarily work for us in our 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s, right? I don't show up the same today as I did a decade ago. And so humans were designed for continual development. It's part of the reason why we were given not only free will, but curiosity. We are designed to continue to evolve. The unfortunate part is that most people flatline in their late 20s. They have the same friends that they have from college. The only additions are usually from playgroup, right? They no longer see outside of their circle, and it becomes Groundhog Day. And they live the same life over and over and over again and really don't have any triggers to do a self-audit because they're living in just a life of repetition. We're designed to constantly be curious to evolve and to build healthier and healthier relationships as we age. If you go back to the tribal mentality, there was a responsibility of the elders to teach to the younger generation, and they were cared for in that same mindset. We did not put old people in homes. They became part of the village. They were cherished for their knowledge, and their responsibility was to exchange that knowledge before they died, right? That is a very innate way of human development, right? As we age, what we learn is to pass on. Some people call that legacy. But if you actually look in the behavioral cycles of how we do develop as we age, we get more and more of a need as we age to share our expertise. That's why mentorship is so critical, right? Is to learn from the people who've come before you. Because so many things in life, even though we like to pretend it's different, the fundamentals are the same. The fundamentals of growing are absolutely the same. How we learn has changed, but what we're learning has not.
Can I tell you, you said something that my favorite quote from anybody I've interviewed, like between the book and the podcast, what, 300 people now?
Oh,
This was Susie Orman, who you would think, and Susie Orman's about behavior, as you know. She's not all about money, it's about behavior. She said this to me, and I might paraphrase it a little bit, and I put it in my book. Every moment you spend with anyone or anything has to be a new moment and not a recreation of the past. I tell you, Amelia, it haunts me every day of my life because it is such an incredible goal. It's such good advice, so insanely hard to do because people like you and I, we spend a lot of our time in front of little boxes.
Yeah.
You know, we're on a computer or on a phone. I mean, so how am I going to make every moment different? And you can, but as a benchmark for how to live your life, as what you're saying, you know, you don't stop at 29. And my big thing has always been, I'm 60 in September, and my first fiction book is being released 2 days after I turn 60.
Yeah, it's so great.
Because I keep saying there's no expiration date on your ability to create. There's no expiration date on your ability to learn.
No.
Every single major character in this book is over age 60, 55, and they live by the same principles.
Yeah. And I think what you touched on something that is so important.
Yeah.
I hope what I'm about to say helps somebody who's listening, right? When we try to go backwards, to recreate a moment, I promise you it will be painful because you can't change what already was. And a lot of us try to go back and capture something that has already happened. I mean, you see this when people go back in a relationship or back to a career or back to whatever you're going backwards towards, the variables are different and it will never be the same again. That's why presence is so important, to learn the practice of being present, because what is happening right now in your life will never happen again. All you can do is look back on it in fondness, but you can never recreate it. And when we have that type of mentality to realize how important this moment is, we show up in the moment differently. And we show up more in a place of honor. And when you're there, it's very hard to be narcissistic, right? When you look upon something for the value of the moment and not the value of self, you would have to pull yourself back to self in order to demonstrate narcissism, right? And so understanding where you put value on, right? When we do a behavioral assessment, I take a look on a timeline on where people are putting value. And so often when people get stuck, the reason why they're stuck is their value equation is behind them. Their value equation is not in front of them. And so if it's not in front of you, you have no momentum. And that's a behavioral modification. That's why I keep telling people, buy the book, take the course, buy the book, take the course. This is what you're going to learn. And then it becomes like Captain Obvious. You're like, oh my gosh, now that I can see it, now I know why I'm stuck. Or now that I can see it, I know what I can do differently. Now that I can see it, I know how to focus time, energy, resources, all that for impact. But if you can't see how you are part of the equation, how are you going to fix it?
And don't you think we have to make a decision? I mean, this stuff is not easy to do.
No.
So it's so hard to do. I have to make a decision every morning to be the aware, present person I need to be. I have to make that decision. Now, I will say, I think in some ways it's a little easier for you and me because our jobs are to be, I mean, nobody's going to listen to us if we're boring doing this stuff. You know, it's not like I interview a celebrity and then have another one want to do it if I'm a snooze fest, you know. So doing what we do, we're forced to elevate and be prepared and have conversations and really be aware or we can't do it. But it's personalities like ours, and there's a lot of them on stage right now,
that pour from an empty cup. They do the giving, they do the give, like this requires energy, focus, like you gotta be, oh, this is the give. And if we don't replenish, we're empty. And when you serve from an empty cup, you actually do damage.
Mm-hmm.
Massive. Amelia, this you guys know very well that this topic is near and dear to my life because I grew up with a narcissistic father, and then I married one for 11 years, the father of my children. And it's very important. There are people here that are actually in relationships with a true narcissist. And that is very dangerous. It almost took my life. I had a stroke at 23. And so I think it's really important that people understand there are so many different types of narcissism that exist. And it's very confusing to try and sort out all the qualities and behaviors. And I think it sometimes even is more unclear what narcissism actually is because we hear the word so much. And it's actually on a spectrum. And there's a healthy narcissism, and then there's that really unhealthy narcissism. And that unhealthy narcissism that sits at that end of the spectrum, the one that's diagnosed as NPD, is the one that people really, really need to pay attention to. And you said a couple things, Amilya. I almost took my life because I didn't value myself. It's the value part. I valued him more than I valued myself. I turned into this, like I used to look at it myself in the mirror and I didn't even recognize who I was. And that's when it became really, really dangerous. And I love what you said about the therapy because when I was in court for 7 years trying to get my children, and courts aren't very educated in narcissism or parent alienation syndrome, which is a real thing. I lost my son 3 years ago because of that, because he is so narcissistic. He convinced and manipulated my son to look at me as like the spawn of Satan. This is when it becomes really, really dangerous. So I think, reading your book and doing all of that stuff really helps you dive deep into self. Because when you know who self is, then you can see this stuff from a mile away. So that's my share.
Well, if I can just, I was going to say, if I could just jump in, is you got to recognize that and grow through it, right? Like it's like Randy was saying, you wake up in the morning, you got to make a conscious decision to grow through what you went through, to learn and not forget the lesson that's being shared with you. Because there's a quote that says, don't go looking for happiness in the same place that you lost it, right? And if you were able to grow through and get out of a relationship, something helped you get out of it. Don't go back to the same place. You didn't get up just to go fall in the same place again. So it's important to grow through it.
There's a difference between a narcissist and a narcissistic tendency, right? Those are two different things. One is clinically diagnosed, and the other ones are learned. They're learned behaviors, right? And so we deal with more narcissistic tendencies. There are behaviors that are narcissistic, and they grow from all different sources, right? And so those are things that we can have an impact on, right? If the other person is willing, but you have to understand it's not an easy lead. That's why I always say you can only control what's inside of you. You can control self. You can't control anything else. And so understanding what's going to work best for you and then making decisions for what's going to work best for you. But it is an awful experience, like Tara talked about, when you get caught up in that web, you can't even see straight. You start to think it's you. You literally start to think it's you. And it's painful. And if you've been alienated from everybody else, when you then start to think about you, then it even deepens that spiral. And it's something that, a lot of people, when they're reaching out, they're like, how do I know? How do I know? How do I know? And I'm like, the first place to start is build within self. That is where you must start, is with what you can do, which is what you can do for self.
Hey, Amilya, I have a quick question. This is Sally.
Yes.
Hey, babe. Is narcissism similar to like love bombing? Are those in the same category?
That's a good question. Love bombing is become this new term, and I think a lot of that is in this reaction of, I think we have more lonely people than we've ever had in my lifetime. I think there's just an abundance of lonely, and people are trying to feed it from wherever they can go. And I think that's that love bombing thing that you're like, oh my goodness, what is going on here? I don't know if that's necessarily a form of narcissism or not, but I definitely know that it's a behavior that can be absolutely overwhelming. And the person who's receiving normally is a big, kind-hearted individual that gets very confused on what their response needs to be because they don't detect it as a red flag, right? They don't see it as a red flag because it's in very good disguise, right? But it is any time. That's why that whole 50-50 thing drives me crazy, right? It's 100%, 100%, because the things that we've been conditioned, right, about, oh, I'd be weak in my knees and I would do it. I'm like, no, all those things are red flags. A healthy relationship should not feel that way. You should feel comfortable. You should feel cared for, right? Not those other things that you heard from Disney movies. The Disney movie version of it is warning signs. Warning signs. So love bombing, for me personally, I think it's dangerous. But I do take that as a sign of unhealthy behavior because it's demonstrating they want to feed off you.
Sally, I can answer that, sweetheart. That is like one of their biggest patterns. That love bombing practice is like, it's like overwhelming, like adoration and attention. And they try and convince you, it's obsession, yes, and they try and convince you how good you two are together as like a couple. And then what they do is they try and shape your role in the relationship as a supporting cast member. That's exactly what they do. And so it's like, for me, for 11 years, it was like battered woman syndrome. It was like horrible, horrible. If you do something horrible, like I'm talking horrible, with the lack of empathy, Amelia, you got it bang on. Like, he'd hurt animals in front of me. Anybody who knows me knows I have, like, I'm mad passionate about some animals, so don't hurt them. And he'd purposely do it, but then he'd love bomb me and say, no, 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 this is why I did it. And it's just this circle that just never, ever, ever ends. And that's one of their biggest patterns, is the love bombing.
Yeah. Well, but they also come in the hero form.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like I said, there's not one pattern. That's why they're so hard. There's not one. Like, again, I never heard the word love bombing until like the last couple of years. Never heard that word before. Right. But it's a good marker, right, to realize, this is odd, right? But so is the hero one. People who look for opportunities to show up as the hero, they're doing the same thing, right? They're pulling power. And again, it's about really understanding you first, right? Because if you're solid in you and you're solid in your own things that you value and your own capabilities, then they have less power when they present themselves in whatever crazy form that they show up in, because you're grounded in self. And so, part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this today is really the importance of building from within, really the importance of having healthy friendships that support you building from within, and that anything that shows up in excess should trigger you to go, all right, like, what's going on there, right? Because, who said that? If it's too good to be true, it probably is. That's just not healthy. It's just not healthy. And building relationships, I think, as we go into a lot of the uncertainty in today's world, our strong relationships that are built from within are going to be what's going to get us to travel through. We really need to focus with who are the 5 people we're spending time with and what is their degree of healthiness, so that we understand that we can make choices on what is and is not working for you. But a person can't get to a place of making choices until they feel a sense of self.
Hi, Amelia. This is Corey.
Hello, Miss Corey.
Good morning. So, with our current generations growing up, we feel like entitlement is an issue. Where would we kind of identify the difference between someone who's acting entitled versus a narcissist?
Say that again. Say it again.
Entitlement. So I know, like with my son, there are things about him that definitely don't show empathy. And in dealing with his dad, who has narcissistic tendencies, I'm trying to evaluate, is it something he was born with, or is it just the way that he has lived in this gaming society and this entitlement society? How do you determine that entitlement difference from narcissism?
By really digging in to how he thinks others feel, right? You want to be able to dive into the feeling space, right, to see if you can build the connection to the feeling of whatever's going on, right? What I mean, even with my own team, with my own kids, when something is awry, be able to say, not how do you feel, how do you think others feel, right? Because that's what's happening in that empathy, to see how do you think the other person is feeling, right? And in leadership, right, really, where we're going from learning to lead from the back instead of leading from the front, that is something that new leaders are having to really lean into, the impact and what is needed in order to guide people from leading in the back, not the front. That's a entirely different skill set. And you can't lead from the back if you don't have the ability to understand how others feel, right? And that's what you really want to dig into. Can he associate with how other people feel from his interaction? That's where you need to dig.
And he does, when I make him aware of that, that it's the initial awareness that he has trouble. Like he is constantly only thinking of himself and part of that might be being a teenager.
Sure, of course, because that those things are developing, and parts of us are developing later because the children are leaving home later, right? So if you look at a lot of the development charts, they were created when people left home much earlier. Now we have kids that are in their 20s and 30s that are still home, right? Especially if they're in hot, like New York and California is a fortune. For them to be able to move out and buy their first home or do whatever, right, is an enormous amount of abilities and cash and all that kind of stuff. So kids are staying home longer. So some of the things that they were, like in my generation, what I was learning, they're not learning yet, right? And so part of it is, are you asking for capabilities of where they are in the development arc? Is it even capable of? But then there's practices, right? You can put practices in place as the behavior is developing, right? Practice can always happen, and then the awareness attaches maybe later on, right? And so a lot of the things when you're raising kids is you have to build in the practices. I mean, I will tell you for my kids, they do a lot of things that they don't necessarily quite understand why they do it yet, but we're forming those behaviors. We're forming for where they will be next. And it's exhausting. I mean, it is absolutely exhausting, but it has to be intentional. I will say that some of my biggest growth of self came from others that pointed out my mishaps, where I could show up differently. Now, I didn't because I was unaware, or I didn't because I didn't know how. But wanting to constantly improve to be my best self is something that has always been there. So I am always in development. I always say I'm a WIP. I'm a work in process. I'm always working to become a better version of myself. And to make that realistic, my goal is to be better than I was yesterday. Am I better today than I was yesterday? Because if I go too far out in the future or too far out in the back, it's overwhelming. But I can be a better version today than yesterday.
Is it time for my commercial?
You may do anything you like, lovely Mr. Randy. Yes, absolutely.
Well,
I'm trying to catch up on the back step.
Genius.com. Go to designinggenius.com if you hadn't noticed that. But you know what? Now the next commercial is me. Finally, pinned at the top. I have a website for my book that I talked about that comes out in September. Rubybook.info. I encourage you all to go to rubybook.info. This happened because of this show. I met Mark Victor Hansen from Chicken Soup for the Soul through Amilya on this show. He had his book Ask, if you remember that. We talked about it a lot. He did my podcast, and at the end of the podcast, he said, Randy, he asked me, are you interested in fiction? And he is publishing my first fiction book in September because of my podcast to him asking me a question that I had an answer for. So rubybook.info. And what's so great for me is you look at who I've interviewed between the first book and who I've talked to here and who Amilya and I've talked to and on my podcast, all of the best of everything that I've learned, I got to give to these characters. So it's really cool. And you know what? Let's talk about people from our past who show up out of nowhere. Sylvia France. Oh my God. We got a little note from my friend Sylvia France here online.
Yay!
Hi, Sylvia France. So she was like, your message hits home on so many levels. It wasn't my message, it was yours, but still. That's my friend Sylvia, who I haven't seen in a long time. So Sylvia, so great to hear from you, and thank you.
So we have another question in the back chat that's asking about love bombing. I don't know who asked that, but I was the same thing. I didn't know there was a term for it. Like, so I was a little slow to the table on that.
Anytime. I would love bomb you anytime you want to.
But I didn't understand what it was. There's actually a term. I think Sally was talking about it as well, and that is somebody that you really don't know who thinks beyond, like, they're calling you, they're texting you, they're sending gifts. My God, you're like the one. You're so amazing. Oh my God, what can I? And they are just like tenfold, as if they were like Prince Charming or Cinderella. That you are the most important, most whatever. I was talking to somebody last night, and he was saying he had gone out on his very first date, and the next day she invited him to go meet her parents. And I was like, oh yeah, that's
oh my God, he's nuts.
I know, right? I was like, okay, everything about that is odd, right? And so that's love bombing. Love bombing is an enormous amount of attention that hasn't really been earned, right? You wouldn't know me enough to behave that way. And so because it can feel very, very good, and it can feel like a fairy tale, it's easy to get sucked up into it. Very easy, very easy, very easy. I don't care if you're a boy or girl. Very easy to get sucked up into somebody who's love bombing on you because it feels good in the beginning. Let me just say that it's in the beginning. It doesn't end well.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and it's important to recognize that, because if somebody's over the top, they're probably over the top for a reason. So listen, we're approaching the top of the hour, and so I'm just going to encourage everybody, go to rubybook.info, go to designinggenius.com, and I'm going to give you guys one more, because I'm having an event in Barbados, an exclusive event in Barbados in October, and of course, the one and only Amilya Antonetti is going to be there as one of our featured speakers as well. So I just want to let everybody know about that. If anybody has some interest in going to a 5-star event in a 5-star island in the newest 5-star hotel, let us know. Join us. Amilya will be there. Several other amazing people will be there.
Who doesn't want to go to Barbados?
I know, right? I mean,
what, really?
Looking forward to it. So you can go to getupandgrowretreats.com or send me a DM, and I'm happy to reach out and give you more information on that. I'm not going to pin something else up to the top because Randy's book is there now. Of course, make sure that you're following Amilya on all social media platforms, as well as Randall Kenneth Jones on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and all the fun stuff. And of course, me, you can find me at Tony Rodriguez with an S. That's Tony Rodriguez with an S. All over the place. You can also just hashtag Get Up and Grow in your search bar. You'll be able to find me that way as well.
And let me say, because I just had somebody backchat me why they can't find Randy. He's like, why can't I find Randy? I'm like, he's not Randy, it's Randall.
Right. That's why I always say when I pitch it, it's Randall Kenneth Jones.
Yeah, that's why you can't find him. It's Randall.
Very proper.
Randy Jones is the original cowboy in the Village People. True story. Cowboy in the Village People. If you search Randy Jones, you get a whole lot of people, including him. We're Facebook friends, have been for years. We have the same birthday. So we have the same name and the same birthday.
You sure it's not you?
Jones,
put on a cowboy hat.
Yeah.
Put on a cowboy hat. That might actually be
no,
you.
I can do that, but we have to. It's pretty funny. And Lucia Kaiser is a friend of his. It's Kaiser, right? I said that right, didn't I?
Yeah, Kaiser. Yeah, Lucia. My daughter's named after Lucia.
Oh, I know. And Lucia and I have talked about it. So anyway, so that's my Randy Jones, Randall Kenneth Jones. So it is Randall Kenneth Jones.
Very cool. Well, listen, make sure that you're joining us again next week. We, of course, are here for the Genius Hour at 9 a.m. On Breakfast Champions at 9 a.m. Eastern. We're back again at 11 a.m. for this interview series. Today we kind of went and did our own thing. We didn't have a special guest, of course. You know, Amilya is always a special guest. So thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, I'm special, all right.
Yeah.
Short class.
And by the way, make sure that you're sharing
You
this.
are special, Amelia.
Make sure you can still share this, by the way, on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Share this video because there's so much great content, so many nuggets that people need to know about, need to hear about. And of course, you can share this on Clubhouse as well, even afterwards, because you can have the recording for this. So this lives on past us. So make sure you're joining us next week. Make sure that you're joining the book. And keep on
Sally,
rocking.
you did an amazing room with Tim's story. I was in there. Oh my gosh, what
Thank
an
you.
amazing room.
Thank you,
It
my
was
love. I just
crazy.
sent you a text, by the way, because I want to do an entire room just on this with you about love bombing and narcissism. So let's get that on the calendar. And let me say this to the three of you guys: this segment the three of you should be 2 hours. 1 hour is just not enough ever. So
I
I
love
just want
it.
to say that for real.
Well, we do it at 9. So we do 9 to 10, and then Meltzer comes in from 10 to 11, and then we come back from 11 to 12. So we were back to back, and now we got David is our sandwich. So we like having a Meltzer sandwich. So, but our 9 o'clock hour this morning was talking about fear and weakness to unwind that little sucker. So we're definitely having fun. But yeah, I was in that room the other night. Wow, it was so good. I mean, it was so
thank
good.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tim is always incredible. But you're going to be incredible because we're going to do this with you because you're incredible.
I'm game.
Well, let us all know when that happens because I'm interested in jumping in on that. Because
I'd love to have you, Tony. Definitely. I will reach out to both of you.
Awesome.
Okay, we're going to turn it over to the social media show who's probably tapping their fingers going, why are they still talking?
Because we don't shut up there. No, you can keep talking. You can keep talking. It's fine.
Because so great. How are you guys doing?
One more thing. No. What do I always say? Tara knows I say this because we talk about not having a guest. I have always said if I gave Amilya the topic of Tupperware, she could work an entire hour on the topic of Tupperware. You could. Now, granted, it would be a metaphor for putting yourself inside a container and pulling something over your not allowing yourself to breathe.
That's right. It would absolutely be a behavior metaphor. I would take everything back to behavior, right?
Yeah, but you could do Tupperware for an hour.
Well, that's the beauty. That's the beauty of being a behaviorist and a master of practical human psychology, like I like to call it, because you're ready for everything and anything, or at least we like to think we are. So, but it's been amazing. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for allowing us to borrow 5 minutes from you guys and ladies, and thank you again. And we look forward to seeing you again next week, to seeing you in some of our groups, some of our events coming up. And we again thank you for being here. Appreciate you all.
I'm waving at the camera.
Bye.
And we are saying